It is the marginalization of thought
of all my videos,
or certain abstracts into a
How
formula.
open this road is,
and then that formula is meshed over, and you take a piece, I'll take a piece, and everybody has a little piece, and they'll see what they can extract or mold out of that little piece. Genetics is simply one of the branches of the mold that we're studying. And it's interesting that the more we find out genetically about ourselves, the more we get to that little black box, which no one seems to want to speak about except us, and that is melanin. We speak about DNA because DNA is almost neutral in its context. Everything that has a biological basis has DNA. So does rocks, dirt, everything has some form of DNA structure because it is part and parcel of a living, breathing, sentient, conscious planet.
Yep.
So there is no part of what we live on or what we participate in that is not conscious. Not only of itself, but as itself.
Oh.
So when Brother brought this particular information to us, what happened is that every time there is a new breakthrough in science, and I know that there are other metaphysicians and other spiritual people who know what I'm speaking about, that every time someone comes to us with something new that science has discovered, the occultist, the metaphysician, the one who studies the spirit, already knows what that formula is. We just have not yet interpreted the language that they've used to describe what they've discovered. But once we get a chance to look at it for a while, we know, based upon the science of metaphysics and the study of the occult realms that our ancestors have studied, we know what they are touching upon and what they are looking through. So
that means I love you
he may hide behind his codes, which probably, if you punch in the letters DNA, you probably get right to him. You have to see that his constant fractionalizing of life is based upon the way that he sees through the prism of his reality. He cannot see or abstractly understand and understand whole beings and whole things. The Caucasoid has a frame of reference that cannot see the wholeness of a thing. He may be able to describe the surface of it, but his ability to interface with that thing that he is observing, he does not have the mechanism, the crystalline mechanism necessary for him to access that. Or there are many who have crossed that line by studying ardently and religiously, quote unquote, and fervently with the dark-skinned masters, but they still do not engender the immediacy of the spirit. They have to describe it in abstract forms through their formulas and what they believe they see as we consciously move through ever-evolving stages in the spirit.
Believe that they see.
So every time the spirit becomes more and more evident within each of us,
on the realm of
he discovers a little something different or more about himself. But you see, we've already put that
just what you were taught to be.
As peoples of color around the world.
When you sit there, you think about being taught to believe in Santa Claus is going to
create in order to interface with sound, light,
because if you don't know the reason why you believe in anything that you believe in,
and I'm doing all of this before we condense into the particulars, because once we do the particulars, we're getting into the white frame of reference. And what I want to do now is to set the groundwork for how we must see and interface with the information. We as metaphysicians and occultists know that every time science discovers something, we know that it's them catching up to the metaphysician.
Yep.
Catching up to the spiritualist. Catching up to the occultist. There is nothing that he will ever discover that is not already known by the very few peoples who still retain the ancient wisdom knowledge, the ancient wisdom sciences, the mystery science that they talked about in ancient Kemet. the shamanic sciences that they talk about amongst the indigenous people. We already know this. But it is necessary because our children are caught up in this paradigm where everything needs to be fractionalized, torn apart, eviscerated, thrown up into pieces, ripped apart, so that you can see how the little pieces work. That's fine. We'll do that. But we must never lose sight of the fact that with every discovery in his own fragmented way of thinking, we must take that discovery and put it back into the piece so that we see how the whole operates. In that way, we won't end up making machines that tear down whole forests, that rip up the skies and the water. Because he is so estranged from the living beingness of this planet, he can, without any conscience, without any responsibility, do what he's doing to the planet. Because this is the way he sees science. He sees what life is. It's just things for him to rip up and study. Consequences be damned. They'll come later.
There you go.
So I must place into the records that his ever deeper incursion into the study of DNA is his ever deeper incursion into the study of dark matter consciousness, which is the study of melanin.
Well, every time I do,
because
I do
melanin
video,
is the intelligence
y'all can do all
that
the
makes
kicking me
the
out of the
spirit
season and all this
real
stuff,
to
but I'm
us.
still going to be, my broadcast
It is
be
the
sweet
aspect of
sweet.
spirit that
With all
weaves
natural sugar
the
coming
intent
from
and the will of the
bananas.
Creator into something that
Yeah, I
we
bet
can
y'all ain't know
perceive,
y'all can make
something that we
sugar out of
interface with through
bananas.
time and space,
Yeah,
something
my
that
boy
we
showed
could
me
say
that.
this is this and that is that. It gives us depth.
I don't have to
It gives us
consume
perception.
nothing
Melanin differentiates
that
the
I
one
know for
spirit
sure
into the
is
many
that.
things that we witness as reality. So the study of DNA and the study of genius is the study of melanin, of which the first peoples of the planet have the abundance of. You see, when they mined us, when they stole us, when they captured us, when they came over and they tore up our ancestry and destroyed us, they knew they were doing the same thing that their scientists were doing, ripping up the melanin, tearing it apart, taking away its homogeneity, its oneness, and its unified form of the world, and fragmenting it into all these different tribal mentalities that separate us one from the other, have us fighting one another, just like he's been doing. So he's ripped up not only us from the earth and from our places where we were indigenous to, he's ripped up our consciousness. He's torn melanin into shreds. He has miscegenated us so that we no longer can tap into the deeper dark matter consciousness that is our legacy within the central part of our brains. So when you have that richer part of ourselves being torn apart, he attacks melanin through the food he puts into our communities. He attacks our DNA genius and what is to come, how we may lead the planet back into its righteous trajectory towards the consciousness, the creator consciousness. He tears that up with the food that we eat, the juices, the kinds of things he puts into our community. The air we breathe with the chemtrails that you see on a clear day, where clouds that don't look like clouds are up above, with planes spewing poisons like barium and aluminum and genetic material that are supposed to be entrained within your lung tissue to change and mutate you. He is destroying the ability of your melanin to interface with the dark matter consciousness called Eta Carina that is heading in this direction as we speak today. The black God or the dark God that was talked about in Amos in your Bible. Because they said God is not the light, God is the darkness. They said the darkness was existence, and from the darkness came the light. Well, the darkness is returning, and it's making all the scientists afraid because it's about to give forth with a burst of light. Phosphine genius is about to burst forward. And they say that once it happens, the skies of our solar system, our galaxy, will not see any blackness for a period of 7 days. Now, these are written in the holy books, but these books were not holy books for us to bow down and worship to. These books were there for us to study as books of science set down by our ancestors, who spoke about melanin in the Bible, or what became the Bible that we read today, what became the Quran we read today, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Kabbalah. All of these different books that we read today have to do with the return of the darkness, which is the eternal womb, the triple black mother. And right now, it's returning. But you see, our melanin, the genius, the DNA that we're about to speak about, is fragmented. So I'm going to try and I'm going to attempt to put together certain things, and which is what I've done. When you asked me what it is that you wanted to speak about the six-strand DNA series. The series, the six-strand DNA, the six there, I'm going to explain what that means. And the nine-strand DNA series. That has metaphysical ramifications way beyond what their science is revealing to them, or what their own contained mentality will allow them to understand. And this is where the metaphysician has to step in. And this is why Dr. Oyibo is not only so essential to the next phase of consciousness on this planet, but why he is feared by the present structure, this present church of Western scientific thought. So, in listening to what it is that you wanted to speak about and hear is global distribution of the DNA series. This is nothing new. This was already known by most of the scientists, because there are books written by the early medical scientists who went to study African peoples, who went to study indigenous peoples to the land south of the equator, where the people are darker and more richly melanated. And they wrote a series of medical books attesting to the difference between melanated peoples and white peoples, to the point where their apothecaries and their pharmacies created drugs differently because they had a specifically specialized effect on melanated peoples as opposed to white peoples. For instance, white peoples have more metal in their medicines than black people can tolerate. So they made most of their medicines so that they could not interface. They had to put more metal into them because the Caucasoid is so deficient of iron. Whereas peoples of color have a rich uplaying of dark iron. That's why you get your dark, black, richly melanated color, is because of the fact that your face and your body has laid up iron in it. But to see, the problem is, you are like an earth without the plants and the soil and the flowers that grow from it. In other words, back in the days, when you had a dark, rich, black earth color, you gave off a greenish, bluish hue. Like you can go today to Senegal and watch those brothers and sisters stand in that sun, and they are so black they shine blue. But people don't know what the secret to that kind of melanin means. And it means that there are times when our people, moving through consciousness as the true earth creatures, that at times when we were in the sun, or when we would think a certain emotional thought, one of the chakras would tell us immediately where your thoughts were focused, and you would vibrate that particular color in accordance with your emotions. That's because you were in tune, and your melanin was not disjointed and fragmented. It was connected directly to the interlacing conduits that connected directly to your nervous system. And that nervous system, through its own conduits, connected directly to the etheric body that you had, which is called the breath form, which you commonly call the soul. So your soul, through the nerve estuaries and the electromagnetic wiring in your body, connected you directly to your skin.
Connected through your heart.
And the soul had its outward representation in the way that the molecules and the atoms formed you to imitate the triple blackness. Because from the blackness came the light, but in order for the light to know itself, it had to be housed back in the blackness. You see? So what happens now, we don't understand what color is. We don't understand the science of melanin, what I call dark matter consciousness. And in thus doing it, we do things unconsciously in the spirit. That's why religion is such a, how do I say this? Such a deep, intoxicating, and addicting substance to dark folks. That is the number one place where they can defer and deter the consciousness of black people by setting up a structure to intercept the true spirit. And the one structure that intercepts the true spirit is religion. The dogma of religion are to take us away from actually interfacing with the true voice of God that will tell you the name of the Creator, because your DNA is linked to your melanin, and your melanin to the pigments on your skin, and that's how you had all these different names for God. Not Jesus. You didn't have these names like Allah. You didn't have all these names. These names came and were foisted upon you because you had names like Ukulukulu. That was the sound of the cosmic resonance of the drums. And the way the Most High spoke to you, so you spoke back the name that was given to you directly. You didn't need a second-hand interpreter to give you a name for God. God already gave you its name wherever you were on the planet, because the name that you called God where you were on this planet was the harmonic frequency necessary to keep the balance of the overall planet in place. So when this Caucasoid came around and began ripping up all of your religious sounds and your music and the way you spoke directly to the Creator, it ripped up and tore apart the planet so much now that it begins to wobble.
Them the truth. Nobody would believe in me.
The planet itself today wobbles because every one of us is calling out somebody named
that can't read or write.
Who never existed.
That's bullshit. I was already saying these names before.
So your melanin can be used to keep you in the prison.
Everything that I
because it's easily infected with illusion. And that's why we must know ourselves from inside out. And if this is a chance for me to speak more deeply upon what it is we need to do, you know I'm going to actually do my best to be here to speak on that.
You know you're bullshit.
Very good. Thanks. Now, I need to read into the record for everyone some things that I put down very quickly for us to understand or understand around what this DNA situation is and what this whole concentration on genetics and, you know, what's going on with the genetics of disease, and we found the gene for cancer and the gene for leukemia and the gene for that. You can go down to Woolworths and find genes. There's genes in everything biological. But he needs to do that. He needs to think that he is in control, because he is going to poison you with what he finds. He can't do anything good with what he finds. He needs to keep poisoning you, because by your suffering and pathology he lives. Know that the medical system does not exist by your health. It exists based on you being maintained within a pool of pathology. Correct. So his control, his science, is to find out what may harm you so that he may stay in control. There is no difference. There is no upliftment in his science, because he has completely extricated the principle of the deity of God within all of his science. You cannot find deity in any of his sciences. Therefore, it has to be satanic. So the study of genetics, the study of medicine, the study of all of the biologies that he has is a satanic study because he does not believe that a divine intelligence operates all things.
Now, if I may ask you a question, if you prefer this to go completely and I interject questions on the end, I'll try to do that.
Good, but let me put this down because then the questions may have been answered by what I have put down here for you. So let me just get some rudimentary things down. Simply put, DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, makes RNA, ribonucleic acids, which in turn, ribonucleic acids makes proteins. Everybody knows what a protein kind of is. Proteins allow things that are called amino acids to be registered messengers. Okay, so I'll show you what I'm talking about when it comes down to, say, for instance, to the DNA helix. And we'll deal with the DNA helix like this, because this is the simplest waveform that we can see. This is not, let me just finish first. DNA is not what you think it is. This is simply an abstract model by what science has done to simplify what it is. Okay, that's all it is. So when they show you this fancy model with all these little things all over it, that's a clinical model, because they don't all look like this. DNA is simply a wave energy pattern crystallized into a gelatinous mold. Okay? And the reason why it seems like this is because we're stuck. And I'm going to get into that. So DNA makes RNA, RNA makes proteins, and proteins allow the amino acids to be the registered messengers. Each amino acid is different and thus has a different geometric shape specific to its duty. So amino acids are little messengers that attach themselves along the DNA. And I'm doing it extremely simplistic because if you get in contact with this guy, he will start getting into the church of his own scientific churches. Huge amount of gobbledygook that simply doesn't do anything because it's their own language. It's their own way of estranging you from what's going on inside of you. So, each amino is a microprocessor of light signature frequencies. Okay? So, when you eat, or when you breathe in, or when you drink water, or when you take in anything that's real food, the breaking down of substances, especially the stuff that you breathe, essentially comes from what your environment gives to you in the form of a breath. So as you breathe in or as you eat in, certain things become digested, not only in the lungs, but in the stomach and everywhere around you. Even knowledge and the sitting and learning is a form of digestion, which creates a certain type of etheric amino acid that is not yet detected by them. Okay, so I already joked you forward maybe 10 years to what they're going to discover somewhere down the line. But when you breathe in, your alveoli in your lungs acts as condensers and compressors of cosmic solar material that is in the air that you breathe. Now, a lot of people say, well, it's in the air. How can I don't see it? Well, you can tell that air is a form of atmosphere, or almost like a watery kind of atmosphere. If you would put your hand outside a car, for instance, and you feel that resistance as you're moving through it, and you can do this, you feel it. There's something actually feeling against my hand. Well, you're like a fish in a bowl. But you are in a more refined atmosphere. You see? So in this atmosphere is a whole other universe. You're living in a terrarium, an open terrarium or open aquarium, with a kind of water that's so refined that this is the way that you breathe. Like the fish breathes, the deeper and more condensed form of this same thing. You see? So when you breathe in what are called etheric materials, solar materials that condense to become your etheric amino acids. But the food you eat is a denser form of the same thing. So as you break down food, you break down food that essentially has signatures within them. The enzymes, the proteins, and the fats, and all the different types of glycerides, whatever it is that you have inside of that food, begins to break down to make certain proteins and sugars that begin to attach themselves along the DNA. Now, this DNA has these little signatures here because through your body every day, through your body, there are waveforms, light waveforms, that are constantly bombarding through your body, more refined, giving you information. And that information that's coming from the outside in the form of light and in the form of your emotions and the form of your thought processes and the form of the electrical magnetic energies in your nerves are passing through the DNA as well. Okay? Now, each amino is a microprocessor of light signature frequencies. It's an antenna for the reception of light codes. Now, let me be very clear about that. Light codes are essentially coming from the sun, but it's also coming from all of what you call stars, coming from constellations, the 12, of course, you know, being the zodiac. Each zodiac has a specific space wherein this world spins. There are 12 of them around us, and we're inside of that. And everywhere we go, they are positioned in different areas as we travel around this and the sun itself. So we're inside this light fixtures. Just like this light is beaming on me, that would be Aquarius. One behind me would be Leo, or all of these. So we're inside of these 12 light fixtures. And behind them, there are 12 or 200 more. So we're getting all these refined form of lights. These coming together and interfacing with one another constitute the light codes that hit us finally. Okay? And as the light is hitting us, we're breathing in the residuals of those light particles that are given off. And we're getting information messages. So, these proteins and these amino acids are micro chakras, and I'll explain all of that, all connected to the 7 primary chakras. Each microprocessor amino has a code combination. Each has a 3-letter code. So you can imagine now that the microprocessor aminos has a 3-letter code. And we're going to get into showing you how you can just cut this part right off. A 3-letter code. These are chemical codes used to articulate different combinations of carbon, melanin, hydrogen, melanin, oxygen, melanin, and nitrogen, melanin, that they collectively go into the constitution of aminos created to receive specific light code instructions. There are 20 known light code antenna processors presently identified by Western medical science. 20 known antenna that define the biocosmic temple we call the human body. The human genetic code is comprised of 64 possible code variations, what they call codons. Now, if you know anything about the ancient I Ching, what they call the ancient Chinese way of dealing with reading, I, and then it's called I, and then CHING, there are 64 different combinations that you could throw of the coins that they give to you. And those 64 combinations of 3 are directly linked to how the code. So if you know how to do I Ching, you can judge what is going on in the human condition based upon your sympathy with the energies of the planet. You can throw those I Ching coins, 4 I Ching coins or the 3 I Ching coins, depending on what system you use. You can throw those I Ching coins and read what's happening to you and interface, because all 64 possibilities have a code next to them that our ancient ancestors wrote down. Okay? And they're linked to the so-called DNA. Now, the human genetic code is comprised of 64 possible code variations. It is these 64 variations that represent the limit or the wall of our perception for Western science. And this 64 code variations that I explained is to the Western science a complete mystery. There is nothing beyond it, because the present perception of humanity and science cannot go beyond the 64 coded wall. It's like 64 bricks to this particular wall that they cannot see beyond. The mystery is that there are 64 possibilities, but only 20 light code antenna keys turned on and are in working order. So, if we know that there are only 20 possible variations within the chemical codes for aminos, and there are 64 possible code variations, it means that 44 code variations that would then link us up to a higher reality within ourselves are missing. Now, here's this man coming along to say that in the southern regions of Africa, below the equator, right now, at this point, there are evidences of people that are supposed to be primitive. Primitive meaning first, but to them, primitive meaning idiotic and savage. But not understanding that these people hold on to the primary code keys that humanity had when they first fell out of spirit. If they found 9, understand that there are 3 that's only missing from them, and 6 missing from them. Because the first stages of being able to climb out of the present perceptual paradigm is to link up to the 12 DNA series. He only got to 9. And we're going to explain what that means. So here we have a problem with the amino sequence. Let's just use one amino acid, the amino acid leucine. L-E-U-C-I-N-E. Now, the amino acid leucine reveals something very deeply in us. I mean, it shows something that they have found out in us. And it shows something that we as metaphysicians have been trying to tell people for a long time, the occultists, the shamans, we tell people, we are locked down. We can't see beyond the present perception because we have refused to release it. And religion is that lock, because it does not explain the spirit. It tells you to believe. But when you believe, it means that you have surrendered your critical thinking and your reasoning mind to accept something based upon what somebody else has said, not first-hand experience. Here's the problem. This society, Western society, is not based in first-hand experiences. Western society is based on vicarious experiences, which means we go to movies, TVs, we go to different shows to see other people enjoy first-hand experiences with us. A second-hand experience does not allow for certain parts of our bodies to develop. It does not allow for take away the soul's ability to interface with the moment on an organic level, and thus traps the spirit or the soul in a paradigm always looking for itself, which is a first-hand experience with itself. So now you have a creature who is living completely by vicarious experiences. Okay, go to church, come to the preacher will strike up